Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 15th Annual Symposium on Saint Thomas Aquinas. This event, sponsored by the Joyce McMahon Hank Aquinas Chair in Catholic Theology, brings eminent figures to St. Mary's each year on or about St. Thomas's January 28th feast day to discuss some aspects and contemporary implications of his thought. My name is Joseph Incandela, and I am the current holder of the Aquinas Chair in Catholic Theology, as well as the Associate Dean of Faculty at the college. We're honored to have as our speaker tonight the Most Reverend Kevin C. Rhoades, Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend, whose talk is entitled The Contemplation of Truth by Faith and Reason, Saint Thomas Aquinas, Blessed John Paul II, and Pope Benedict XVI. And now to introduce Bishop Rhoades, it is my pleasure to present the President of St. Mary's College, Carol Ann Mooney.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to St. Mary's. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speaker, Bishop Kevin Rhoades. Bishop Rhoades was appointed the 9th Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend by Pope Benedict XVI on November 14, 2009, and installed as our bishop in the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Fort Wayne on January 13, 2010. I'm delighted to welcome him to St. Mary's College for the 15th Annual Symposium on St. Thomas Aquinas, sponsored, as Joe said, by the Joyce McMahon Hank Aquinas Chair in Catholic Theology. This is one of two endowed chairs at St. Mary's dedicated to St. Thomas, and both are made possible by the generosity of Joyce Hank, St. Mary's class of 1952. She's obviously a generous benefactor to the college and also an emerita member of our Board of Trustees. Outside of his ministry to our diocese, Bishop Rhoades serves as chair of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth. He is also a member of the Administrative Committee of the USCCB and the USCCB Committee on Doctrine. In addition, he continues to serve as Episcopal Moderator of the National Catholic Office for the Deaf, as well as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. Previously, Bishop Rhoades served as chair of the USCCB Task Force on Healthcare and as a member of the USCCB Subcommittee on the Catechism. At the international level, and on behalf of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, Bishop Rhoades has recently been appointed by the Vatican as co-chair of the International Theological Dialogue of the Catholic and Reformed Churches. We are grateful for his service in all of these areas, but tonight we welcome him especially in his episcopal role as teacher and as the fellow academic that he is. Bishop Rhoades earned advanced degrees in dogmatic theology and canon law from the Gregorian University in Rome. He later served as professor on the faculty of Mount St. Mary's Seminary, where he taught courses in systematic theology and canon law. He left Mount St. Mary's in 2004 when he was appointed by Pope John Paul II as Bishop of the Diocese of Harrisburg. He served the Diocese of Harrisburg until his appointment by Pope Benedict as bishop here. I'm quite sure that this academic background serves him well in our diocese with its 5 Catholic colleges or universities. Catholic colleges are places where the vigorous dialogue between faith and reason is joined and fostered. We serve the Church in union with our bishop by affirming the origin of all things in one Creator, and by seeking the unity of knowledge as our witness to this affirmation. As Pope John Paul II has said, in promoting this integration of knowledge, a specific part of a Catholic university's task is to promote dialogue between faith and reason, so that it can be seen more profoundly how faith and reason bear harmonious witness to the unity of all truth. We therefore look forward to Bishop Rhoades' talk, whose title is The Contemplation of Truth by Faith and Reason, St. Thomas Aquinas, Blessed John Paul II, and Pope Benedict XVI. After the bishop's remarks, he has graciously agreed to answer your questions, and then we'll adjourn for a reception in the back of the room with food and conversation around the fireplace. Please join me in welcoming Bishop Kevin Rhoades.
Thank you so much, Carol. And I always feel so much at home when I come here to St. Mary's College, and thank you, Joe, for the gracious invitation as well. It's always wonderful to come here. I came about 4 o'clock and met 3 young students who are religious studies majors, and it was wonderful to spend some time with them and then to see the St. John's Bible in the library. I don't know if everyone has gotten a chance to see that. What an amazing thing. So I highly recommend it in the library. Then we had a wonderful dinner together. So I always feel very much welcomed here at St. Mary's, and we're indeed blessed in our diocese to have St. Mary's College. After dinner tonight, we had a small group. Joe led a prayer, which was really beautiful, and I thought this would be good to begin before I give my little talk to say a prayer together. It's actually, the first part of it is the words of Saint Thomas himself, a prayer of Saint Thomas Aquinas. So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Grant us, O Lord our God, a mind to know you, a heart to seek you, wisdom to find you, conduct pleasing to you, faithful perseverance in waiting for you, and a hope of finally embracing you. God our Creator, you made Thomas Aquinas known for his holiness and learning. Help us to grow in wisdom by his teaching and in holiness by his faith. May the discourse of this evening's symposium do justice to its inspiration and find favor with you. Amen. Saint Thomas Aquinas. Blessed John Paul II. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Faith and reason are like 2 wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. You may recognize those words. They're the words of Blessed John Paul II at the very beginning of his encyclical letter in 1998, Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason. The Holy Father wrote this inspiring landmark encyclical to reflect upon truth in the face of contemporary skepticism and doubt, at a time when, as he wrote, many people stumble through life to the very edge of the abyss without knowing where they are going. In this encyclical, Blessed John Paul wanted not only to reaffirm the truth of the Christian faith, but also to reaffirm the capacity of human reason to know the truth. He challenged philosophy to recover and develop its own full dignity, to recover its original vocation, especially its sapiential dimension, as a search for the ultimate and overarching meaning of life. And we see similar reflections in the writings and speeches of Pope Benedict XVI. Both popes reassert the Catholic tradition concerning the harmony between faith and reason. Both popes highlight the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas, that faith and reason share the same origin in God, and thus are necessarily compatible, and that faith builds upon and perfects reason. St. Thomas, both a philosopher and a theologian, remains our great teacher in the pursuit of truth on the wings of faith and reason. We live in an age and a culture in which there's developed a certain skepticism about our ability to know truth. This isn't something new in human history. It's not something new in the history of philosophy. Skepticism has many different definitions, and the term itself derives from the Greek verb skeptomai, which means to look carefully and to reflect. So already in ancient Greece, there were skeptics. The skeptics were known as the skeptikoi. And these early Greek skeptics refrained from making truth claims. But not all of them necessarily taught that knowledge of the truth is impossible. The position that there is no such thing as certainty in human knowledge is usually referred to as academic skepticism, global skepticism, or absolute or universal skepticism. And this school of thought argues that one cannot know anything to be true or false. Philosophical skepticism, in its many variant forms, is found throughout the history of philosophy, beginning with the skeptikoi of ancient Greece. It then resurfaced in the late Renaissance, and especially during the so-called Age of Reason, the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries. For example, the philosopher David Hume argued that even the most basic beliefs about the natural world, or even in the existence of the self, cannot be conclusively established by reason, but we accept them anyway because of their basis in instinct and custom. Both Blessed John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI challenge various types of skepticism in contemporary culture. They challenge moral skepticism, the belief that moral knowledge and truth does not exist or is not attainable. They challenge metaphysical skepticism, the denial of the possibility of metaphysical knowledge. They challenge empirical skepticism or empiricism, the denial of any truth beyond what can be proven by the scientific method. And there's no question that we live in an age in which there's developed a certain skepticism about our ability to know the truth. Yet, deep within every one of us, every human being, there's a natural desire, an innate desire to discover truth. Radical skepticism leaves the human being in a state not only of frustration, but a state that easily leads to despair. Human beings have a natural desire to know the truth about life and its meaning. In Fides et Ratio, Blessed John Paul writes about fundamental questions which pervade human life and which transcend diverse cultures and periods of history. Questions like, who am I? Where have I come from and where am I going? Why is there evil? What is there after this life? These are questions, John Paul says, which have their common source in the quest for meaning, which has always compelled the human heart. In fact, the answer given to these questions decides the direction which people seek to give to their lives. The human person's innate desire to know the meaning of life has been stifled by a certain agnosticism and relativism, fruits of a skepticism that easily results from the bombardment of a multitude of currents of ideological thought. Pope Benedict XVI addressed this issue in the famous homily he preached before the conclave that elected him pope. The then Cardinal Ratzinger spoke of the relevance of the words of St. Paul in his letter to the Ephesians about being tossed by waves and swept along by every wind of teaching arising from human trickery. The future pope said, "How many winds of doctrine we have known in recent decades. How many ideological currents, how many ways of thinking. The small boat of thought of many Christians has often been tossed about by these waves, thrown from one extreme to the other, from Marxism to liberalism, even to libertinism, from collectivism to radical individualism, from atheism to a vague religious mysticism, from agnosticism to syncretism, and so forth. Every day, new sects are created, and what St. Paul says about human trickery comes true, with cunning that tries to draw those into error. Having a clear faith based on the creed of the Church is often labeled today as fundamentalism, whereas relativism, which is letting oneself be tossed and swept along by every kind of teaching, looks like the only attitude up to today's standards. The Pope said we are moving toward a dictatorship of relativism that does not recognize anything as certain and has as its highest goal one's own ego and one's own desires. Catholic teaching on faith and reason avoids the errors and pitfalls of fideism and rationalism, of fundamentalism and relativism. There is no question that recent decades have seen an explosion of human knowledge in many areas, especially in the natural sciences and technology. There have been great advances in many fields of knowledge. Both John Paul II and Benedict XVI have praised the impressive scientific and technological progress of this age. Yet at the same time, both pontiffs have been critical of the concurrent neglect of the search for the higher truths and ultimate values, what we can call the neglect of the transcendent. Both popes have criticized something that has become quite common in many universities today, the increasing fragmentation of knowledge. In Fides et Ratio, Blessed John Paul wrote about the crisis of meaning in contemporary culture. Though there is a tremendous proliferation of knowledge, of data and facts, there's a certain doubt, a skepticism or indifference concerning the meaning of life. He therefore called upon philosophy, as I mentioned, to recover its sapiential dimension as a search for the ultimate and overarching meaning of life. And this requires philosophy to recover its trust in the human capacity to know the truth, to extend its range of inquiry, a range that became constricted by schools of positivism that rejected metaphysics. According to John Paul, the philosophy that developed in the Christian tradition averts the dangers of various problematic currents of thought, especially prevalent today: eclecticism, historicism, scientism, pragmatism, and nihilism. The philosophy that developed in the Christian tradition reached its apex in the teaching of the angelic doctor, Saint Thomas Aquinas. But it did not begin with Saint Thomas. In the very first centuries of the Church, Christians encountered Greek philosophy. We can even recall in the New Testament, St. Paul at Athens and his encounter with Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. Now, though St. Paul contrasted the wisdom of this world and the wisdom of God revealed in Christ, he also recognized the profound truth of the natural capacity of human reason to come to know God through creation. Romans chapter 1, verse 20. A capacity that has been diminished by sin, but not destroyed by sin. We must be clear that the Christians of the first centuries did not subordinate faith to reason or the truth of revelation to Greek philosophy. Their primary concern was the preaching of the gospel. And I'd like to give an example of one of many possible examples of early church fathers engaging the Christian faith with the reason of the Greek philosophers. Saint Justin Martyr, really the most important of the 2nd century apologist fathers. Blessed John Paul called St. Justin Martyr a pioneer of positive engagement with philosophical thinking, who continued to hold Greek philosophy in high esteem after his conversion, though St. Justin said that he had found in Christianity the only sure and profitable philosophy. St. Justin had become a Christian after a long journey of studying Greek philosophy. He wasn't a fideist. He did not disdain reason. He discovered Jesus Christ, the Logos, the eternal Word, as eternal and creative reason, the fulfillment of creation and salvation. Pope Benedict wrote that for St. Justin Martyr, both the Old Testament and Greek philosophy were like two paths that lead to Christ, that lead to the Logos, the Word. And this is why Greek philosophy cannot be opposed to gospel truth, and Christians can draw from it confidently. There are seeds of truth in Greek philosophy because every person, as a rational being, shares in the Logos and carries within himself or herself a seed and can perceive glimmers of the truth. Both John Paul II and Benedict XVI stress that the early church opted for reason and philosophy rather than for the pagan religions of the Greeks and Romans. The early church condemned the idolatry and the myths of paganism. So its natural ally was philosophy, which also criticized pagan religion and its myths. And Pope Benedict has said that Justin Martyr, and with him other apologists, adopted the clear stance taken by the Christian faith for the God of the philosophers against the false gods of the pagan religion. I wish to present one other example among many of the church fathers of Christian engagement with philosophy prior to Saint Thomas Aquinas. The great Latin father and doctor of the church, St. Augustine. Like St. Justin Martyr, Augustine had studied the Greek philosophers. He too was a seeker of truth. We know how many years Augustine sought for the truth before his conversion. And shortly after his conversion, Augustine wrote in a letter, "It seems to me that the hope of finding the truth must be restored to humankind." John Paul II wrote an apostolic letter about St. Augustine, in which he said, this message that the hope of finding the truth must be restored to humankind is an important one for people today. The message that truth can be found and that we must resist and overcome skepticism. St. Augustine did just that. He abandoned philosophies that did not arrive at truth, that did not arrive at the true God. He wrote, after his conversion, that faith and reason are the two forces that lead us to knowledge. And he held firmly, and this is part of our Catholic tradition, that faith and reason should not be separated or placed in opposition. Rather, they must always go hand in hand. And so we have the two famous Augustinian formulas, crede ut intelligas, believe in order to understand, and intellige ut credas, understand in order to believe. This is the Catholic synthesis. According to John Paul, St. Augustine succeeded in producing the first great synthesis of philosophy and theology, embracing currents of thought, both Greek and Latin. In him, too, the great unity of knowledge, grounded in the thought of the Bible, was both confirmed and sustained by a depth of speculative thinking. The synthesis derived by St. Augustine remained for centuries the most exalted form of philosophical and theological speculation known to the West. St. Justin Martyr and St. Augustine are just two examples of the many fathers of the church who valued reason and philosophy, while at the same time holding that faith and revelation occupied pride of place. Elements of philosophy were accepted or rejected depending on their convergence or divergence from revealed truth. The philosophy that developed in the Christian tradition reached its apex in the teaching of Saint Thomas Aquinas. It's taken me a while to get back to Saint Thomas. Saint Augustine had produced, as I said, a great synthesis between faith and reason. But Saint Thomas produced a new synthesis. To understand St. Thomas's great contribution, we must know the context of his time. It was the 13th century. The teaching of Aristotle, which was largely unknown before in the Latin world, was spreading throughout the West. It was creating a sensation among students and teachers. Aristotle's teaching entered the West through Arab commentators, Avicenna and Averroes. Aristotle's philosophy captured the attention and the fascination of the young people of St. Thomas's age. And many enthusiastically accepted Aristotle's philosophy, and others refused to study it, fearing that a pagan philosopher's thought might go against the Christian faith. So Thomas Aquinas, following his great teacher, St. Albert the Great, did an in-depth study of Aristotle's works, the original text, without relying on the Arab commentators whom he was able to critique. St. Thomas commented on Aristotle's works, recognizing what was valid and in harmony with Christian revelation and what was not. Pope Benedict has stated that from this study, Thomas Aquinas showed that a natural harmony exists between Christian faith and human reason. And this was the great achievement of Thomas, who at that time of clashes between two cultures, that time when it seemed that faith would have to give in to reason, showed that they can go hand in hand. That insofar as reason appeared incompatible with faith, it wasn't true reason. And so what appeared to be faith was not faith, since it was in opposition to true rationality. So Thomas created a new synthesis, which formed the culture of the centuries to come. And this new synthesis presented by St. Thomas differed from that of St. Augustine and the Church Fathers. The Fathers had worked out a vision of reality starting with faith, and they used elements of Platonism to respond to questions about the faith. They called this vision our philosophy. But it wasn't a rational system distinct from faith. What Thomas did was study a philosophy that explained reality through reason alone without revelation. So Thomas needed to rethink the relationship between faith and reason and between theology and philosophy. He had the pre-Christian philosophy of Aristotle on the one hand and the Christian faith on the other. St. Thomas was convinced they were compatible. He recognized their independence and also their reciprocal relationship. Pope Benedict explains that in his theological work, St. Thomas supposes and concretizes this relationality. Faith consolidates, integrates, and illumines the heritage of truth that human reason acquires. Thomas trusts in faith and reason, since both may be traced back to the one source of all truth, the divine Logos, which is active in both contexts, that of creation and that of redemption. Reason and faith, according to St. Thomas, use different means or different cognitive procedures. Reason receives a truth by virtue of its intrinsic evidence, mediated or unmediated. Faith, on the contrary, accepts a truth on the basis of the authority of the Word of God that is revealed. For Thomas, there is an autonomy, but not a separation between faith and reason. In other words, they help each other. Faith stimulates reason to be open to ever broader horizons. Faith keeps alive in reason the search for foundations. Faith enriches the work of reason. For example, reason can affirm that God exists, the existence of God. But only faith, which receives the divine revelation, is able to arrive at the mystery of the Holy Trinity. Now, how does reason help faith? In three ways. Number one, it demonstrates truths that are preambles of the faith. Number two, it gives clearer explanation of the truths of the faith. And number three, it resists those who speak against the faith. I think the insights of St. Thomas are very helpful to us today. In the face of the positivism of much of modern philosophy, which teaches that we do not know being, but only the functions of the reality that can be experienced, St. Thomas helps us to see that we know not only the functions and the objects of natural sciences, but we can know something of being itself. Let me give you an example. We can know another person, the you of the other, not only his or her physical and biological aspects. In the face of moral relativism today, St. Thomas's principle that divine grace presupposes and perfects human nature is quite important. Reason is capable of discerning natural moral law. Such knowledge gives ground and foundation for the defense of universal human rights and the fundamental value of the dignity of the human person. In the face of empiricism and scientism, St. Thomas gives us a broader vision of reality through greater confidence in human reason. Reason is not limited to empirical scientific reason. It is open to the whole being and to the fundamental and inalienable questions of human life. Pope Benedict says that according to St. Thomas's thought, human reason, as it were, breathes. It moves within a vast open horizon in which it can express the best of itself. If reason becomes reduced to thinking only about material objects or realities that can be proven only by the scientific method, then we become closed to the great questions about life, about the human person, and about God. Such reductionism impoverishes humanity. If reason is restricted to consider as true only that which can be experienced by the senses, we fall into materialism. Technology easily becomes more important than persons. Human behavior becomes governed by instinct rather than objective and universal norms. Pope Benedict says that it is urgent to rediscover anew human rationality, open to the light of the divine Logos and his perfect revelation, which is Jesus Christ, Son of God made man. Our Catholic tradition, the teaching of the Fathers and of Saint Thomas Aquinas, and confirmed by the Magisterium, holds that faith and reason should not fear each other. Faith presupposes reason and perfects it. It seeks it out and has trust in it. Reason, enlightened by faith, finds the strength to rise to the knowledge of God and spiritual realities. It helps all to see the reasonableness of faith. Through the centuries, popes have praised the contribution of Saint Thomas Aquinas to Catholic thought. Pope Leo XIII wrote that Thomas's thought scales heights unthinkable to human intelligence. Pope Paul VI called Saint Thomas an apostle of the truth. And Blessed John Paul II praised Saint Thomas's passion for truth. John Paul wrote that Saint Thomas was impartial in his love of truth. He sought truth wherever it might be found and gave consummate demonstration of its universality. Looking unreservedly to truth, the realism of Thomas could recognize the objectivity of truth and produce not merely a philosophy of what seems to be, but a philosophy of what is. Today, St. Thomas Aquinas and his teaching can help us to resist the dictatorship of relativism. When I was a student at a Catholic college, I remember studying the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas in several philosophy courses. And studying St. Thomas was one of the most rewarding intellectual experiences I can remember. I appreciated the opportunity to receive an education in which we could examine the ultimate questions, contemplate truth through the lens of both faith and reason. This is one of the great things about going to a Catholic college. And in Ex Corde Ecclesiae, John Paul wrote the following, and I think part of this Carol quoted at the beginning. A specific part of a Catholic university's task is to promote dialogue between faith and reason, so that it can be seen more profoundly how faith and reason bear harmonious witness to the unity of all truth. And while each academic discipline retains its own integrity and has its own methods, this dialogue demonstrates that methodological research within every branch of learning, when carried out in a truly scientific manner and in accord with moral norms, can never truly conflict with faith. For the things of the earth and the concerns of faith derive from the same God. A vital interaction of two distinct levels of coming to know the one truth leads to a greater love for truth itself and contributes to a more comprehensive understanding of the meaning of human life and of the purpose of God's creation. Last summer, I was in Madrid with 120 young people from our diocese for World Youth Day. A couple are here. And during that World Youth Day, Pope Benedict had a meeting with a group of young university professors. And he gave a wonderful speech in which he criticized the utilitarian approach to education that seems to be more and more prevalent today. The Holy Father emphasized that the mission of a university professor should be something more than forming competent and efficient professionals capable of satisfying the demand for labor. Notice how education's spoken of in political debates and that's often how it's seen. But the Holy Father says education should go beyond mere utility and pure pragmatism and impart more than mere technical know-how or cold and purely functional data. He said the university or college is called to be the house where one seeks the truth proper to the human person. And this search involves rising on the two wings of faith and reason. The Holy Father spoke against the skepticism that doubts or denies the human capacity to advance along the path of truth. He spoke about the essential human questions that continue to challenge us and to stimulate us. And as he often does, he emphasized that it's the Christian faith, that the Christian faith speaks to us of Christ as the Word, the Logos, through whom all things were made. There is a rationality inherent in creation. And as creatures made in God's image and likeness, we can attain to an understanding of this rationality. And I was struck by Pope Benedict's describing the path to truth, not only as one of faith and reason, but also of understanding and love. Perhaps here we discern the influence of St. Augustine, or perhaps the Franciscan thought on, or Franciscan tradition on Pope Benedict's thought. He said to the young professors, "We cannot come to know something unless we are moved by love, or for that matter, love something which does not strike us as reasonable." He added, "If truth and goodness go together, so do knowledge and love." This unity leads to consistency in life and thought. That ability to inspire, demanded of every good educator. So the Holy Father exhorted the professors to cultivate also the virtue of humility, to avoid the sin of pride, which bars the way to truth, when he said, "Truth itself will always lie beyond our grasp. We can seek it and draw near to it, but we cannot completely possess it." Or put better, truth possesses us and inspires us. So as students and professors, many of you who are here today, and everyone who's here today, may you pursue the truth, with humility and love. And may your spirit rise to the contemplation of truth on the wings of faith and reason. May the one who is absolute truth and perfect love bless you with his abundant grace. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us at St. Mary's, I'd like to thank Bishop Rhoades for that very lively and challenging talk, one that's very faithful to the spirit of Thomas Aquinas and being grounded in the spirit of revelation while also reaching out towards philosophy and secular wisdom. We do have time for some questions. Bishop Rhoades has graciously agreed for some dialogue, maybe for about 15 minutes or so, take us up to 8 o'clock. I'd ask you just three things. First, if you can raise your hand and someone will bring over a microphone so that we can all hear you. Secondly, if you can keep your questions brief so that we can get as many in as possible. And third, if you can be sure to restrict your questions to the specifics of what Bishop Rhoades has just delivered to all of us so that we can all be interested in the exchange.
And if I don't know an answer, we have Thomistic scholars here I'm going to be calling on, like Joe.
Bishop, thank you for your marvelous exposition. You're a member of the Committee on Doctrine of the Bishops' Conference, and I presume also a member of the Canon Law Society of America.
Yes.
I'm wondering, in view of the Canon Law Society's offer to advise the bishops or counsel them about investigating theologians, clearly your presentation was about theology. As a member of the magisterium, a bishop with authority and responsibility to instruct the faithful, what would the canonist part of you say about the value of that offer from the Canon Law Society?
Yeah, that's interesting. Our Committee on Doctrine hasn't met since that, because we're going to be meeting again in March, so I'm not quite sure. But I think all this stems from our conversations with Dr. Elizabeth Johnson. And created a bit of a stir in the theological community. But I think I think what we need to do is we probably need a revision of that statement, doctrinal responsibilities, and perhaps the Canon Law Society can help us with that. One of the difficulties we have today, and in this particular case, if we have a theologian whose work becomes popular, for example, and is used in undergraduate college faculties, for example, that presents the Catholic way and Catholic teaching in a way, or teaching about God in this case, the theology of God, in a way that we believe is not in accord with Catholic teaching, it's almost like it's already out. The book's already out. It's already having an influence. And as pastors, we bishops have a responsibility to make sure that the truth of the faith is defended and protected, and to point out where there was error. So I think what happened is it would have been better if something like this was perhaps presented to the bishops beforehand. And then we would have avoided this public kind of disagreement that happened. And maybe the Canon Law Society could help us with that, because technically a theologian doesn't need an imprimatur for a book that's going to be used, but if it's something that's going to deviate from the tradition, you kind of are in a bind. As a bishop, I have a responsibility or as bishops, I should say, because it was the whole committee on doctrine, we have a responsibility that to make clear what is authentic Catholic teaching or not. So if you have college freshmen, for example, reading this book or having this book in theology and thinking, oh, this is okay, when they're actually what we bishops determine to be errors in that book, then we have a responsibility to speak out. So I don't know what we do. I think perhaps there needs to be some better process for perhaps examination of such texts before they're actually used. So the canonists perhaps could help us with that. Any other questions? Yes.
In regards to your comments on avoiding using education as a way of just feeding the workforce and utility, how would you offer any advice on how to maybe steer education towards that faith and reason and those questions that maybe we all have that we're afraid to ask? How is you, as your role as bishop, maybe give us a little advice on how to steer education towards that?
Yeah. It's a very, very good question, because I think a lot of students are thinking, okay, I got to get a job when I get out of college, so they're thinking very pragmatically, which is okay. I mean, that's a reality. However, education is so much more. It's about also not just the intellect, it's about growth in virtue, growth in, I could go on and on about, especially a Catholic higher education. But I would say that I think it's so important to preserve the liberal arts tradition that we have, especially in our Catholic college and university, a core curriculum where these more important questions about life and about God, the transcendent dimension of life, that gives meaning to one's life. It's not mere function. It's not mere pragmatism. So I think it's very important, especially in Catholic university, that should be distinctive. That's why, for example, in a core curriculum in a Catholic college, theology needs to be there, and philosophy, and courses that deal with our rich heritage, that deals with faith and reason. I mean, that's one of the blessings of being able to study, if the Catholic college or university is authentically Catholic, where this indeed takes place, this dialogue between faith and reason. Because that's for life. That enriches our life. And that's what education in university should be. It shouldn't be just about pragmatism or what's useful. It should be about the deeper meaning. And I think that would enriches our lives. It enriches our family lives, our future, how we look upon other people, how we look at the world, how we make decisions about our life. All those things should be part of the formation that takes place in a Catholic university. Really should be in any university, but especially in a Catholic university or college. Yes.
Hi, Bishop Rhoades. Right now, I'm the Catholic Charities field placement student for the social work department here at St. Mary's College. And one of the things that really resonated with me was your talk about the dictatorship of relativism. In today's world, it's evident that as society is more educated, we become more aware of the social injustices in this world that other decades ago weren't questioned. As college students now, how can we as Catholics move past what we already know in our classes and move towards a deeper, I guess, a deeper sense of justice? Because at times I feel that we're afraid to step on people's toes, or that we're not willing to be prophets for what is just and what is true. So what would be your advice for us?
That's another great question. I think you're touching upon what I was saying also about what are the foundations for our beliefs about values and the dignity of the human person, and you get into social justice, all of these things. What's the grounding for all that? And that's where faith and reason come in. And I really would say on my own personal level, it's my relationship with Christ and seeing Christ in the poor and the needy. And it's that vision of faith comes in very much in seeing how important it is to therefore stand up for the right to life of the unborn and the elderly, and to stand up for those who are less fortunate in our midst, to see everyone as our brother and sister in Christ. And I think that's part of university, Catholic university or college, is to be formed in and be motivated by faith, to see the intrinsic dignity of every human person. So I think that's what one discovers also through the studies of theology and philosophy. And by the way, our Catholic Charities, since you're helping with them, what an injustice it is that we serve everyone who comes to us. We never ask what their religion, someone in need. You know what, I mean, to be Catholic is to, we don't discriminate. We want to serve everyone, and we have the most social services and Catholic colleges, universities, Catholic healthcare facilities and hospitals, and now the federal government mandating that we cover in our health insurance immoral practices is really a violation of our religious freedom, something that we bishops of the United States will, and in collaboration with all our Catholic institutions, we will just not compromise on this, our values. And this is probably one of the most, the decision last week that we would have to do things against our conscience is something that is very scary for the future, but we can never violate our conscience on these matters. So I just wanted to add that as a little aside.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop. I can't tell you how happy I am to hear you say that. That's wonderful. My question is, do you think it's fair to say that this disintegration between faith and reason is related to or analogous to in any way the disintegration between body and soul that came about from original sin? I mean, is that a similar kind of circumstance?
It's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that, but I think I think there might be something to that. I'd have to give that more thought. I think the disintegration of relationship between faith and reason, which we especially see with the exaltation of reason during the Enlightenment, and then the other extreme is fideism, which we see, for example, in fundamentalism. We see it probably most dramatically in Islamic fundamentalism. And so you have these two extremes, and then you have the Catholic Church, which is saying, no, it's not saying either faith or reason, it's saying both, and they both originate in God. But I'd have to give more thought to the question of the body and soul relationship. I'm not quite sure. I have to, sorry. Yeah.
Hello, Bishop.
Hello.
I teach at Holy Cross College, so I met you.
Louis.
Yes.
Good to
you
see
did
you,
great.
Louis.
Thank you. So I had a question. I know that this is the 15th year now for the Symposium on Aquinas. So, and I'm not trying to be funny with my question. I've learned to engage Aquinas in the last few years. I've learned to enjoy reading the Summa. I can even say I've learned to love reading the Summa. And a few years ago, I never would have said that. But my concern as a professor of theology is to ask you, besides the people you mentioned, like Augustine and Aquinas and Benedict XVI and Pope John Paul II, who can I recommend my students read? I mean, Aquinas, of course, right? But most undergraduates are not going to enjoy engaging the Summa Theologica with its layout. So is there someone in the back of your mind and that I would also recommend to my students?
Oh, man. I've been out of the academic world for too long now. I really would love to see our Catholic college students reading more of John Paul and Pope Benedict. I mean, even Benedict's homilies are amazing. His Wednesday audience talks. I mean, I think, how many Catholic college students at St. Mary's, Holy Cross, and Notre Dame have read Fides et Ratio? How many have read Veritatis Splendor? I think college students could get excited about those. I mean, obviously a teacher who gets excited too, enthusiastic, like I'm sure you are. But I think those are real gems of wisdom. We've been blessed with two intellectual giants, spiritual. I mean, they're incredibly holy. John Paul's now blessed, but the holiness of Benedict as well. But these are intellectual, brilliant theologian and philosopher. I mean, John Paul more the philosopher and Benedict more the theologian. But I think young people who could really get into it, I mean, John Paul's theology of the body. Young people are really attracted by that. Presented in a more contemporary way. Some of those who've interpreted John Paul's theology of the body in a more contemporary way would be great reading for students. I would love to see courses on the theology of the body at all of our Catholic universities. And that introduces them to, deep truths of our faith. So I would, I'd have to give more thought about theologians and philosophers today, but I think I'd like to see more reading of the popes themselves. Okay, well, listen, I have to drive back to Fort Wayne. You've been a wonderful audience. God bless you all.